The meeting invite was written this way. Two council members can't be in the same, can't be in separate rooms when there's a virtual meeting. So Councilmember Benedict is sitting in one of our committee rooms here just outside of the council chambers. And we are in a physical room together that makes us compliant with state law. So obviously, this would have been easier if everybody was at home, but we had to provide the opportunity for folks who wanted to physically come here to be here. So we actually do have three neighbors from the Brush Hill area who are here in the committee room with us, and they're looking at one of the laptops, and then Councilmember Benedict and I are sitting here, and we'll facilitate the meeting. Want to say hello?
Thank you, Councilmember Gleaves, for facilitating this. And as this is the best, fastest way for us to get together as a group. And so we appreciate everybody joining us. This is a great format that we've used since the start of the pandemic. So there'll be a good presentation you'll be able to see. And then there will be an organized question and answer period so that everybody can make sure that their questions get answered. So we're here to make sure that we hear you. And I think that on the District 7 side, I think you're going to see some really good changes, but then look forward to hearing feedback as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Benedict. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. You know the drill on these virtual meetings. Mute when you're not speaking so that the feedback can be cut down to a minimum. I appreciate all of the engagement with this. This is a large project, and so there should be a good amount of engagement here. And this meeting is certainly representative of that. We've heard everybody loud and clear on this. The meeting that I had for the Music Valley and Pennington Bend neighbors went well. It was well received. The development team continued to take feedback from everybody. We had the meeting on the other side of the river at the Inglewood Library, heard everybody loud and clear there. And so I think that the presentation tonight, like Councilmember Benedict mentioned, is indicative of the feedback that we've heard from everybody. This site, I'll just set it up this way, and then I'll turn it over to the development team to go ahead and give the presentation. This site is certainly interesting because it has conservation policy butted up right against what we call T3. It's kind of a technical term, right? And ultimately what T3 means is that it has the potential for some high intensity uses. So there was no like real transition, but I think that this proposal does show transition, does show sensitivity to the conservation policy. I think you'll see in this revised proposal that it does even more so. And then, like I mentioned earlier, especially to District 7 Brush Hill folks, we hear you loud and clear on the issue of noise and basic quality of life stuff. So we heard you loud and clear. I'm thankful that the development team went back and did a revision. So without further ado, I will feedback. Oh, that's right. Where everybody was at the Planning Commission, the feedback from there as well. And the continued feedback from planning and from Metro Water and Stormwater and NDOT and everybody. All that feedback continues. So I will go on mute. Matthew, thank you again in our council office for helping host the tech side of this, and I'll let you hand it over to the development team to make their presentation.
Who's the development team?
Is it Mickey or who is leading that from the Northgate group? You may.
Sorry, this is Katie Hallgren with Northgate. I'm on.
Okay, hi Katie. Thank you. I guess Matthew, give her presentation control, right?
Actually, if you're able to give it to Jason.
Okay.
Let's see.
Jason Cockmer?
That's correct. Yes.
Sorry. There you go. Jason should be the presenter now.
Okay.
All right.
Perfect. Let's see. So thank you to council members Benedict and Syracuse for having us and holding this meeting so that we're able to share these updates to our master plan. So based on the comments that we received and feedback, you'll notice here in the master plan that one of the big changes that we made was to really make a big effort to pull a lot of elements out of the conservation policy area. And so you'll see that now that is remaining as open space and farmland. So the elements that we pulled out of there were the farm to table restaurant that was in the lower portion of the property. And that has now been moved up into the T3CC area. Another element are some RV campsites that we had that were south of the existing farm road. So those have also been brought out of the conservation policy area. Another big element that we changed was the venue, the concert venue. So that will now be only an indoor concert venue. It won't have any outdoor events. And then another element was we made a few minor changes to the multifamily, just making sure that we're providing adequate buffer from the surrounding properties. And those really are the large changes that we made. We do anticipate having some improvements to the natural features that are down in the floodplain. That's the existing streams and wetlands, and anything we do there would be enhancement. So we would be improving potential wildlife habitat. And so that's pretty quick, but generally overall, those are the changes that we made to try to address the concerns that we heard.
Can you show before and after?
Sure, yeah, I think Jason does have the previous plan. Are you able to pull that up, Jason?
Can you see that one?
No, just I'm only able to see the current one.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. And actually, while Jason is pulling that up, the other thing that I have failed to note is that with moving the campsites out of the conservation area, we have reduced our campsite count by 25 campsites. So from 450 to 425.
Sorry. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Okay. So that's a previous.
So what's up on the screen behind there is what was initially submitted to the Planning Commission. And the one behind it is the revision, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
So the open lawn space remains
There
for
will
the
be
event
open.
space?
Correct. Yeah. It'll just be open lawn for the adjacent multifamily. So it could be a place that people can gather, you can throw a frisbee, have a little picnic, but there won't be any outdoor events.
Okay. Thank you. Can you update the plan to reflect that? Because it still shows that it's an event space.
The new plan should, can you
You
zoom
put
in on that,
open
Jason?
lawn. Open lawn.
Got it. Okay.
Right. And there's
Sorry,
also,
this one,
yeah.
the one you're reading here, that's the old one that was previously. and this is the resubmitted plan.
Okay, I see now. Thank
Sorry,
you.
no, you're right.
And it'll also, and now that we've moved the farm to table restaurant there, it'll also provide space for the farm to table restaurant.
Yeah.
Does that mean that the land that you're not developing now will never get developed?
Yes, I mean, with this is our SP, so we would have to follow what we're showing here.
Thank you.
Is it safe to say this is a time for the questions then?
Yeah, I think so, unless
Okay, I just
either
didn't
of
want
you
to
have
jump
more.
in if there was another plan. First off, thank you for your time to present this to us and for being responsive to a lot of the concerns that people had. So we appreciate that. You mentioned that you moved to the Farm and Table restaurant. My recollection is, and forgive me, I'm not able to actually see too well the pictures, but from memory of looking at the original plan, I seem to recall there was a proposed like a microbrewery or a brewery that was next to the farm and restaurant, a Farm and Table restaurant. If that's correct, where's the brewery? Is it gone or was it part of the restaurant?
It was part of the restaurant, and it was to have a tasting room there. And the idea behind that original placement was to have something that people traveling along the greenway, along the west side of the property, something that could attract, and provide an amenity for the neighborhood. So now that tasting room would be, it'll be a little bit smaller, but it's incorporated in with the farm to table restaurant.
Okay then. And I think that at least on the Brush Hill side of the river, I'm not too sure about on the other side, but there were serious concerns about noise. In part, you've addressed that with making the amphitheater have indoor events only. However, of course, there's all kinds of other sources of, music and loud noise. So, I mean, when you say that there would be no outdoor events, does that include no, music being played via speakers outdoors, that can get broadcast across, the development?
Yeah, I mean, with our campground that is kind of one of the closest elements to those neighbors, we have quiet hours. We make sure that we're meeting all of the requirements, the decibel requirements.
Okay, so there wouldn't be any indoor music event that might have speakers going outside. Okay. And then the other issue I think several of us had was with regard to lighting. You can imagine that the river is a special place, obviously, especially in a night with a night sky. And to the extent that the development, either because code will require some lighting with regard certainly to parking lots for the camping, cars, visitors, etc., as well as any other kind of lighting that might be part of the proposal. And to what extent you all have addressed or considered lighting issues, because clearly people who are in that area along the river are essentially destroy their ability to enjoy a night sky.
For sure. So starting with our campground, as I mentioned earlier, we have quiet hours, and then so none of our amenities are open after dark. So none of them are lit aside from anything that's required for safety. So the pools are not used after dark, the sports courts, none of that, and really encouraging our guests that they're there for a camping experience. And part of that is, sitting at your campsite and also being able to enjoy the stars. So we want to make sure that we don't have lighting everywhere that ruins their experience as well. And then for the other elements, similarly, we don't want them overlit for sure. And so we'll meet the minimum requirements, but we'll make sure that we, have lighting that promotes all dark sky requirements, making sure that it's primarily down lighting, so you don't have glare just shining right up into the sky, and do all that we can to reduce any effect that we would have.
Well, that's very reassuring. So specifically, you will be going by the dark sky, night sky guidelines with regard to lighting associated with any part of the development, including the hotel and the apartment complex, et cetera.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I think that's going to go a long way for a lot of folks.
Hey, everybody. This is Councilwoman Benedict, and I just wanted to make sure that, just so Councilmember Syracuse and I can make sure that we're hearing from folks, because we are virtual, if everybody could do like what you do at the Planning Commission and give your first and last name and your street address, or at a minimum, what district you're in, 7 or 15. Or neither, but you're attending and want to speak, please, if you could share that with us so that we can capture that and make sure that we're representing you when we do get back in front of the Planning Commission, and also to hear your feedback. So
I will jump in real
Thank you.
quick. This is Matt Wilkinson again. I noticed we have a few people raising hands. I would recommend that if people would raise their hands, and then I'll call out so we can try and keep it orderly, because if everybody starts to rush to have questions, it could create a jumbled mess. So I'll start off, Jeffrey Miller. If you want to unmute and start, you'll mute and start.
Thank you. Yeah, Jeff Miller. I'm at 4216 Brush Hill Road. We are on the bluff looking right out over this. I just have a question about the cabins. Are they only for like weekly rental? Or are they going to be open for long-term rental arrangements?
No, they're just short term. They're just like our other campsites.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy Quinn, if you're ready.
Hello, this is Nancy Quinn. I'm at 4012 Brush Hill Road. First, council members Syracuse and Benedict, thank you for organizing this. It's a relief to see everything that was removed from the southern end of the floodplain. It was a relief to see that removed. One question I have about the apartment area, it seems, Katie, like there were a couple buildings added. Is there an increase in the number of units?
There is not. No, it's the same number of units, which is 300. We did reorganize a little bit. So originally the club was part of one of the residential units, and so that's now its own separate, smaller building.
Okay. Also, as with regards to the path that's sort of closer to the riverside, was that going to be a public path that you guys were going to manage, and has that changed now to NDOT managing it, or?
That I guess Councilman Syracuse can maybe speak to that a bit. It's something that we will build. And our understanding is, yes, that it would be.
NDOT would maintain it?
Correct. Yeah.
Also, it occurred to me, I know that there's only emergency access to Pennington Bend Road, but will people be able to sort of like, they want to see the river. Will they be able to walk over across Pennington Bend Road and just, they see open land and walk to the river?
I guess our campground guests, you're wondering if they would walk all the way through the agricultural fields and.
Yeah. I mean, or if they're out there, if you guys end up doing like whatever field games, you know what I mean? And I'm asking more, like I would be interested if I was on Pennington Bend, if all of a sudden campers were going to be like, hey.
Yeah, I mean, we will have fencing along the property.
Okay.
Fencing that indicates that, this is the end of the campground, and to be respectful of our neighbors.
And so whether or not that path is fenced, will that be determined by like when you guys figure out if NDOT's maintaining it or you guys are?
So the pathway wouldn't be fenced, but typically we'll have like a split rail fence, because we want some visual, something visual that lets people know this is the edge of the campground. So that would occur, if Jason can maybe just run your cursor along it, that would occur along that kind of that last campground road. So we would have just a little split rail fence, but the multi-use path, that will be public.
Okay.
So that's open to everyone. So we're not going to fence that.
Okay. Yeah, I would be curious though if they would be able to, just walk off and cross Pennington Bend Road, because then I would think too, if that starts to become a thing, that maybe we should consider crosswalks, that sort of thing. Hello?
Yeah, I don't think that's not something that we would promote or encourage. our
Yeah.
guests to-
Hello. I also, sorry.
I can speak to that. You won't be able to safely cross Pennington Bend to go onto somebody's private property in order to view the river. So that won't be a possibility. The multi-use path system is, I'll just briefly, during the pandemic, I worked with NDOT Parks and Planning on a policy update to the walk bike plan that recognized the rural area versus some suburbia right next to regional tourist destination. And this was really a way of getting pedestrian connectivity more quickly and paid for by developer instead of tax dollars. So this multi-use path system that was really started by the development on the other side of the parkway now is something that's going to be kind of a quasi greenway / sidewalk. So instead of doing sidewalks all up and down and putting more concrete and whatnot, it made more sense for the rural type of character that this area has to have a publicly accessed multi-use path system. So it meets the greenway goals for parks. It meets NDOT's goals for sidewalks. So that's the short story there is the multi-use path system is a quick way to get pedestrian connectivity for all residents of the Bend.
Okay, great. I also, Emily, Councilperson Benedict told me that there will be an archaeological study, and I was curious to hear more about that. Is there a difference between a study and a survey, and who will do that?
So as we move through, and anyone from Gresham Smith that can speak in more detail, feel free to jump in, but it's a study that will be required in the future as we work towards our final SP, and that's an archaeologist that gets hired, a third party that will conduct that. And there's archaeology, there's biological studies, there's all sorts of studies that may be required, and we'll comply with those as necessary.
Oh, great. And then one other question, if I could, and this may be more for the council members. What is the estimated revenue that will be generated for the city from this development?
I don't have that figure off the top of my head. More than it is now. I don't know, but I guess it all depends on the valuation of this when the assessor does their next assessment, I would guess.
Yeah, well, and I know the property portion of it, it might be a minute before they can determine it. But what about tax revenue? And I would imagine the CVB has numbers for tourists generate X number of dollars, per day or whatever. And also, will these RVs pads be subject to the hotel tax?
No, there's no tourist development zone here or anything like that captures anything like additional beyond property taxes. Only the Opryland Hotel over there has that additional kind of resort fee.
Okay. Well, yeah, if you happen to have, and I'm not sure who is speaking, but if you happen to have any estimated revenue figures, I'd be interested to see.
I'll just
Hey,
jump in here
Nancy,
real quick again. This is Matt.
Councilwoman Benedict. That was
Council-
Councilman Syracuse
Okay.
talking. And neither he nor I know what those additional revenues would be. The sales tax rate, the local option sales tax is 2.25%. And so that would be for any sales tax that goes through. 7% of the sales tax that we pay goes directly to the state for
And
everything in the city. From there was I forgot the remaining, the rest of my answer for you, but I think it was superfluous. I think it was above and beyond what you were asking. So I would just say, we don't know what the improved value will be that the assessor will assess.
Sure.
And the sales tax revenue, again, it depends on that. The hotel, oh, I know, you had a question about the hotel motel tax. The
Yeah.
tax rate as it relates to campgrounds is, I'm not sure if that's collected on campgrounds or not. It would be whatever's collected on them today.
Okay.
You know, the other ones around this, it would be the same taxation, thing.
Yeah.
Property tax is the main lever that the city has for collecting revenue and
Okay.
providing services. Sales tax is a portion of what we get, and there
Yeah.
are some other things that bring in revenue, but property tax is really by and large where we get the revenue. And so with this area that's, that's going to be improved land, that's a real estate terminology, that's an asset management terminology with the improved land value for the area that will be built, is where the tax revenue increase is going to be. But until the tax assessor lets us know what that is, we don't know what that revenue is going to be.
Okay. And the reason I ask is just sort of, I was thinking kind of philosophically, like looking at, the portion that is still within the flood zone or the floodplain, and thinking in my head, how much revenue is that specific portion going to generate? And is that enough for the community to feel comfortable with this being on the floodplain and degrading the floodplain?
So I'm going to jump in real quick. This is Matt Wilkinson again with the council office. As part of rezonings like this, we generally don't look at tax rates or changes in what tax revenue may be received. That's ancillary and something that you can't really determine at this point because none of this has actually been built. And like they're getting their preliminary SP now, but there's no guarantee that this gets fully built out for 5 years or 10 years. I mean, hopefully it gets built out. Hopefully it's a successful development, but there's no guarantee. And so there's no point in trying to run on some estimates like that because we don't know what the future tax rate will be. We don't know any changes in state taxation law. There's too many variables to provide any sort of estimate for any kind of tax revenue increase or change at the time. I will say that right now, since it is farmland, it's probably part of the state Greenbelt program, which does have a reduced property tax rate. That's just me speculating on the basis of it being farmland.
Okay.
But in terms of future revenue, no development in the city really has that study done because it's impossible to determine.
That's interesting. I might want to have a side conversation with you at a later date about that in more depth if you're willing. Also, last question, would it be public information if Northgate's receiving any like tax incentives or abatements or?
It would be public information and they are not receiving any tax incentives at all.
Thank you. I'll shut up now. I feel like I've taken up too much time.
May I talk?
Sorry, the next person's going to be Timothy. If you want to speak, please raise your hand. There's a little button icon that you can click that has a little hand sign, and then you'll be in the queue to speak. The next person is Timothy Weeks.
Well, I don't see a little hand sign.
Just a minute.
Timothy, if you're ready to go, feel free to unmute and start.
Is that it?
Remember to give us your name, your full name and your street address.
Am I talking now?
Yeah, go ahead and talk.
Okay, this is Richard Lawler. I'm here with my wife, Sherry, and we live on Pennington Bend. And I appreciate all the previous tax information, but it's totally irrelevant as far as I can see. What seems to me to be the main issue is whether or not we want this project. And I think the developers have made huge concessions to satisfy some of the objections that the people across the river have made. We live right on the river. We're right next to the project. And as far as I know, no one down here has had major objections, even to the first proposal. Now that we have the second proposal, which is much less invasive and should take care of any objections that are coming to us from across the river, I think we could go ahead and move on with this project. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to give Timothy one more chance. Timothy, if you want to speak, please unmute. Oh, sorry, I accidentally unmuted. Sorry, I accidentally pushed the button. If you can unmute yourself again. Thank you. Sorry about that.
There we go. Okay, thank you very much. This is Tim Weeks. I actually live in District 12, so this has no direct effect on me, but I'm here listening in as a member of the executive committee of the Middle Tennessee Group Sierra Club. One, it's good to see that the project has been reduced in size to protect the conservation area. So that's a good thing. That's appreciated. You mentioned that this area would remain ag use. And I was just curious, for my first question, I'm just curious whether that ag use will continue and by whom.
So yeah, the ag use will continue. Currently, I think we would maintain the gentleman who's looking after the property right now. And I think that, that may evolve over time, but that would be our current plan.
What is the size of the area that used to be part of the development that's now completely left alone? That's the conservation area. What's the size acreage of that?
Jason, do you know that off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head. I was just about to try to look up for it.
All right. Well, it looks like it's roughly about 1/3 of what the original proposal was. The one specific question that I had, though, is that you mentioned in this conservation area, there is a stream and you guys were going to do enhancements for wildlife, et cetera. Can you more detail exactly what you mean about potential alterations of the stream and the land area itself, and who is giving you approval or feedback on what those plans are?
Sure. So we're working with an environmental engineer, and we're just in the preliminary phases of it. But it would be things, for example, like the existing streams have been channelized since the property has been farmed. And so it would be trying to return those to a more natural streamline. And then same with the wetlands, to return them to a more natural form. So we're working with our environmental engineer to come up with, what those typical treatments would look like. And then we'll have to work with TDEC and the Corps to get those finalized and approved before anything is implemented.
Okay. The only other question I had was a curiosity question. The Corps of Engineers recently requested proposals for an area in my backyard that was called the Cook Recreation Area. Your proposal looks very similar to the type of project they were looking for. Did you guys submit, you don't have to answer this, but maybe you will. Did you guys submit a proposal to the Corps for developing Cook Recreation Area with this very plan or something similar?
No, Northgate did not.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your responsiveness to the community and to the environmental concerns that have been expressed for the conservation area. And I wish you the best as you move forward to the Planning Commission stage.
Thank you.
Eller Kelleher, I'm sorry, I probably butchered your name, but Eller Kelleher, you're free to speak.
That second time was perfect.
Perfect.
Thanks, guys. And thank you to both of our council members for, or councilmen and women setting this up. I appreciate it. This is Eller Kelleher. I am at 4014 Brush Hill Road. I have two quick questions and points to make. Understand that those along Pennington Bend, you're getting some positive feedback from them. However, and again, I hate to beat a dead horse here, but we really do welcome anyone living along Pennington Bend or the developers to come and sit in one of our backyards to see how impactful this development is going to be. Northgate really appreciate all of the work you've done to revise the plan, but for those of our neighbors across the river, it really is going to be a significant change to our view, and I hope you can understand and hear that and know where our concerns are coming from. So with that said, my two questions and points are, a number of the homes along Pennington Bend, I know are, they're frequently rented out as Airbnbs and short-term rentals. So council, I think your Councilman Wilkinson, I want to just ask, what has been done with the residents that own those properties that are renting those? Have you talked to them again? Just to make the point that a lot of the abutting properties to this site, they don't live there full time. And have you talked to them? And I just want to make sure that is noted and in the record.
Hey, Eller.
It's
I live
Councilmember
on
Benedict, Emily. So I don't know the specific answer to Airbnbs, but I can tell you that whenever we send out notices, it goes to the tax address on file. So
Okay.
it would have gone to those homeowners for I think it was 146 mailers that it sounds like just hit everybody's mailbox today that we sent out last Thursday, by the way. As soon as we knew about this, I'm sorry they hit your box so late. But all of those, I think maybe only 80 some of those were were mailed to addresses on the roads where they were, for the homes that they were addressed to. In other words, I think like some 50 plus, somewhere in that range were going to locations other than where the home is located or where the property is. So my point there is to say that all of these planning commission notices that go out go to those addresses, and it's a matter of whether the person reads that, engages with that. That includes that if it's unfortunately we see institutional owners these days, corporations owning things, it goes to those locations as well. And so it's up to those folks to read and respond.
I would like to say something.
Wait a minute, baby.
Can't find the hand.
Are we on, Jeff?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Richard.
Oh, my God.
Okay, this is Sherry Lawler. I live on Pennington Bend, and I'm, impacted by all of this. We live 4 doors down from our B&B, our house that we lived in for 47 years. We now rent it out. And we are very much aware of what is going on. I also want to say that we are very much aware of the concerns of the people on Brush Hill. I remember vividly what happened when the people on when Opry Lane was put in and ruined the view of people from Moss Rose. They had to look across at that huge complex instead of the lovely treed view that was there for so many years. But living in this area that is Music Valley, we have had to make a lot of compromises, and legally, there's just so much you can do to fight development. By the way, Timothy, we are also long-term members of the Sierra Club, and at any rate, we would like to see this thing finalized. We think it's we appreciate the feedback from the people on Brush Hill and the positive changes that they have made possible. And I'm just going to shut up now. Bye-bye.
Taylor, did you have any other questions to ask?
No, yeah, I have one more question, and really appreciate everyone's thoughts and comments and responses. Thank you. My second question is for Katie and the Northgate team. Obviously fantastic on getting the wetlands and kind of a lot of that plan development out of the floodplain. However, I just noticed from the 100-year floodplain line in other drawings, it still that still captures a fair number of those campsites. And I'm not sure if I know you all have made a number of concessions already, but I'm just for the safety aspect of this proposed site, that I think it's something, I know it's upwards, or if not more than 50 site RV plots or sites that are still within the line. I know that there is an evacuation plan that is being put in place, or that you guys are going to conduct. But again, just want to note that I still have some concern that the number of campsites, and I think I know it's somewhere maybe north of 100 that are still within the 100-year floodplain. And I don't know if there's anything that you can do to somehow minimize the number of sites, maybe not remove them completely, but again, just for safety issues there.
Yeah, so they're correct. There are still some sites that are in the floodplain, and that's something that we have that condition in many of our campgrounds throughout the U.S. So we're very versed in how to develop those campsites in a way that they can handle any sort of flooding, and then also that they don't have a huge impact, or to lessen the impact on the land there. So the sites in the floodplain will have gravel drives, and as you noted, we have an evacuation plan, and that has been submitted to planning along with our resubmittal. So yeah, I think we feel pretty confident with the sites that we do have in the floodplain. And to circle back to the earlier question about the amount of development we have in the floodplain, so of our total site, about 100 acres are in the floodplain, and currently the campsites that you just referenced represent 20% development in that 100 acres.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Crystal J, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hey, I appreciate that. I'm Crystal Jones. I live at 2906 McGavick Pike in Donaldson, in Jeff's district. I'm kind of unique because I lived on Brush Hill, and my father lived on Brush Hill before that for, goodness, decades. So I kind of see both sides of the river, because now I'm on the Donaldson side of the river. And so the number one thing I have to do is say a big thank you to our council and to the developer. You definitely have heard a lot of our concerns. And as someone who's been very active in the community for many years, and as a native Nashvilleian, and when I say that, I mean, back to the settlement, when this place was founded, I have to say this has been one of my unique experiences to see how well you guys have responded. And I really, really appreciate that. And I want to start with that, especially you, Jeff. Thank you. Now, I do still have a couple of concerns that really haven't been addressed yet. The number one concern I had was noise. I really appreciate you guys converting. As someone who lives just a mile from Music Valley and who is on the river and really enjoys my peace, I really appreciate the fact that you've made that venue indoors. And thank you very much. The second thing that that I still do not see addressed is a couple of things. The number one, having my view from Brush Hill in 2010, I saw the river go through that land. Okay. And that view I had, it was, it wasn't as traumatic as actually having to evacuate, but it was incredibly traumatic because we on that bluff did not know who was dead, who was alive, while we were looking at the river literally flowing through people's houses. Okay. And so knowing that, knowing how powerful that river is, knowing that we were part of East Nashville, and the one reason why East Nashville was not impacted as greatly is because of Shelby Park, because of a bend that was not allowed to be developed, and because of this land that was not allowed to be developed. So I have to ask, I've seen and I've read the traffic study that was done. I don't think it's sufficient, to be quite honest. I don't think in any way it was sufficient. There is only basically one way to get out of this area when they're about to release water from the dam. And people had to be evacuated on boats before because they couldn't get off. They couldn't evacuate via car. And so my number one question is, are we going to do a real evacuation study for this area before we allow a development? Are you there?
So when you say this is Katie with Northgate. When you say evacuation study, do you mean a larger, like, of the entire
Yes,
area?
a more independent study. And listen, no, I'm an auditor. That's my profession, right? And for 10 years, I've been embedded in what's called management, right? So I can perform an audit, but I'm still on management side. The people you got to do the evacuation study or the traffic study, you paid for. And, I've been in public account or I've been liaison for public accountants. It's the same kind of thing. We need a real independent study of the evacuation off this peninsula because we don't have, what's really needed is another exit onto Briley Parkway. That's really what's needed, but the state's not going to do that. So you're looking at a venue that's still 4,500 people. You're looking at mostly the same level of sites, right? So when you're looking at an evacuation area, and let me just say one more thing. I also did a history book on Inglewood. And I interviewed people that saw this peninsula, this bend underwater in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s. This is not 100-year plain. I don't care. It's not. The people who've lived here will tell you it's not. It will be underwater in the next 20 years. How are you going to evacuate people?
So I think Mark with Gresham Smith can probably speak better to the traffic study. I mean, the traffic study is just generally how our property affect or how our development would affect current traffic, and that's that is something that's all based on. I mean, they have certain formulas that they have to use. So there's not really anything that can be manipulated or anything that
it absolutely can. Like one the month you do it in, which he did it in April, which I had a short-term rental. April was one of my slack months. It just an example. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. So, but then I think another issue is, as you're saying, the evacuation plan, which is more not necessarily a one-off, but that's not the day-to-day
Yeah,
issue. So I guess you're concerned with, you're concerned with the flooding and evacuation
right.
aspect, correct?
Right. And the main concern I have, although, yeah, I love RVing, and I have to admit, I love the opportunity to have another RV resort just down the road. I really, I really do. So, but the main thing is that event space, getting 4,500 people out, getting rigs out. We all know how long that takes. You know, getting them out of that area when you only really have one avenue of escape. And the time frame, you can look at the 2010 flood or the flood in the 1970s, and you can see how long it's a very tight turnaround time to evacuate people. It was, I want to say it was within an hour to evacuate Opryland Hotel in 2010 before they had to release the water from the dam because, and that's the thing, when they release the water from the dam, it's coming. All of that water's coming, and they have to do it because the dams are so old that they have to relieve the pressure on the dams.
So a couple of things to interject. One,
Sure.
now that we aren't doing the outdoor venue portion, so that reduces the patrons to 1,300 for the events venue. So that's one piece that's changed. Another piece, is we do have a good portion of our property that is out of the floodplain. So guests that we have that are down in the floodplain, yes, they need to be gotten out of this area, but we also have the capacity to accommodate some of those up on our part of the property that's out of the floodplain. So we have the large field that's to the south of the farm to table restaurant that Jason is circling around now. So, if in a very short time frame, we have the capability to get guests out and to be able to,
As long as
to
they can
accommodate
stay.
RVs.
I'm sorry, I hear what you're saying. As long as they can stay in the area. I don't think that was possible in 2010, but that's a good point. Can you get them to higher ground without evacuating them out of Music Valley?
Yes,
and I think that's a great thing for a real independent evacuation study to explore.
Oh, shut up, bitch.
How
long does it?
My second point, and I'm taking a lot of time, so let me end here. My second point is this, is the 20% tree canopy. I don't make an apology for it. I've actually walked away from a lot of money saving trees that are like 200 years old. And it's really critical. And as an RVer, I can absolutely tell you, I only choose, I try to only choose RV camps where I have a good tree canopy. It's really hot in Tennessee. And it's really critical to have that tree canopy, especially in the summer months where tourism is the highest. And so I want to ask you, are you guys still just limiting just 20% of existing tree canopy? And I say that from a business perspective. I think you should update. I really think you should increase that.
Yeah, and I think that terminology was maybe a little misreading or didn't truly reflect what our plans are. So you can see in this illustrative here, where a lot of the campsites are located currently are open farmland. So there are no trees there.
Yeah.
So the trees that you see are trees that will plant, and you're 100% correct. That's what our guests want as well. They want to be in areas that have tree coverage. And I have family in Nashville. I've spent a lot of time there. I totally understand how it can be super hot. So
can you save? I mean, because as we know, and as I know from preserving trees, there's no way that you can plant a maple today and it provide any sufficient shade for our heat in Tennessee in any sufficient time frame. So can I just challenge you there
You just shut up.
to preserve more of that tree canopy that
Yes,
exists already?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is our plan. And that's partly the reason why we've located our cabins where we have those will be stick-built cabins that will work around the existing trees. So that is our intention. And,
Okay.
you know, by planning, we have to go in and survey trees. We have to maintain a certain amount of canopy, and we will meet all of those requirements at a minimum, and plan to exceed them.
Ms.
Okay.
Jones,
Yes.
may I speak? This is Trey Rudolph with Gresham Smith.
Hello.
I'm a landscape architect, and have been working almost 16 years. That the 20% number is, we have to understand that this SP plan is a regulatory document.
Right.
And the only thing that we can consider preserved are those trees that we preserve by Metro Nashville's zoning ordinance definition. So that means any encroachment into the canopy of a tree, even the slightest bit, doesn't count toward any kind of a preservation in terms of tree canopy preservation. So the 20% number was based on what we knew we could hit. The intent in everybody's mind, you know, ours from Gresham Smith, certainly Northgate's, as you mentioned, there's a really good business justification for wanting to maintain as much of this tree canopy as possible.
Absolutely.
So our intent is, you know, we're going to hit that 20% or whatever is required. You know, we're in discussions about changing that note and how it reads and how it applies to the plan. But we're going to hit the minimums for the permitting. But the intent is to certainly not go out there and cut down every tree that's not counting toward our minimum thresholds. So through the use of, you know, sensitive site construction methods, you know, appropriate placement of cabins and RV sites, our goal is to save as many of these trees on site as possible for the exact reasons that you mentioned earlier.
That sounds wonderful. Okay. Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness of y'all's plan. I really do. And y'all's willingness to change, you know, based on the concerns that we've expressed. Given that I have suffered through the traffic on my road on McGavick Pike, you know, for Music Valley events, you know, that remains my only concern at this point. And I appreciate y'all's time.
Thank you, Crystal. Before I move on to Carolyn, I'm going to make a quick note. Please.
I have we have a question here in the room.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was just going to make a quick announcement real quick. We had
Never
somebody
mind, Matt, we're good.
Sorry, we had somebody unmute and do a couple profanities. I will say, please be respectful to your neighbors. And also, please stay muted and raise your hand if you want to speak so we can make sure we get everybody through here fairly evenly and equitably. So I will say, like, if please be respectful, I guess is all I'm trying to say. Thank you.
This is Carolyn, and I'll be very respectful. Thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention. And speaking of trees, and speaking of the Moss Rose experience with Opryland, is it already part of the plan, or could it be part of the plan to have perhaps even an evergreen tree line somewhere on the, you know, not somewhere where it's appropriate that would line, you know, the river, to help buffer the view as well as the sounds that would be emanating from the development, particularly to, well, I guess to folks on both sides of the river. But I can tell you that having a tree buffer between this side of the river and Opryland would have been wonderful. Never happened. But is that something that you all have already considered, or something that you could consider would be a long, full tree buffer lining the river, and placed in the appropriate places?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch who it was that was speaking. This is
Oh,
Trey with Gresham Smith. I'm sorry.
Carolyn.
Carolyn, I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure I spoke to you directly. Um, Again, as the landscape architect, it's our job to try to create as enjoyable an experience both for the users and for the community surrounding our projects. And if we can find a way and a place to add evergreen screening that would provide the benefit that you're talking about, I know that, again, Northgate is interested in being as good of a neighbor as they can be, as is evidenced by the changes and things that we're making in the plans here. The problem we would have would be just making sure we knew exactly where the appropriate placement for that screen would be. Typically, the closer to the source of the sound, the more effective that screen is going to be, particularly when we're talking about sound that may travel over a pretty extended range. But certainly, and combined with the quiet hours and trying to maintain that the quiet culture inside of this development that is beneficial, again, to Northgate. So we will work in conjunction with that and make sure that we have screens in place to dampen that effect to the surrounding community as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, that'd be great. And it would also help, I would imagine, with the lighting issue too. So great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you. Okay, and Nancy Quinn has her hand raised up. Feel free to start.
Hi, I just had one follow-up question. This is Nancy Quinn on Brush Hill Road. So I read through the support letters, and one of them referred to affordable housing. Is affordable housing going to be part of the apartments? I would fully support that. I just wanted to point it out if that's the case.
Yeah, it is something that we're looking into. This is Katie. I apologize for not saying who this is.
That's fantastic.
Nancy, if I could, this is Councilwoman Benedict. One of the most frustrating things out of our relationship with the state, which is very clearly in the press these days, is that they preempted our ability to do inclusionary zoning. So if we wanted to hold any developer to include some level of affordable housing, if we tried to tie that to a zoning change, the state would prevent us from doing that altogether. It's a very unfortunate thing that we cannot do, and I can tell you, I know Councilman Syracuse and I both agree that we would wish we could do that. Unfortunately, it's not something that we can tie to this itself, although it is very good to hear that that is of interest, and I hope that they're able to make a commitment themselves to looking at some level of affordability when and if they do build.
There are a lot of obscenities running through my head about the state right now, but I'll keep them to myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Please raise your hand. You have them?
We got one coming here in the room.
This is Bruce. I'm on Brush Hill. I think I'll keep the rest of my information personal after that last go around. As I understand it, the 1,300, that includes the people that would be within the entertainment area. Is that correct?
This is Katie. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so that doesn't even go to the point that you're going to have 3 to 5 to 6 people in a RV. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of radios, that's a lot of light, that's a lot of noise. It does matter. I know because one of my best friends over there owned the 2 rivers, and his biggest complaint was the people that he had to deal with. So I'm just telling you, That's just the people. Try getting this many RVs out of that dense area, that very, very small area, in the event of any type of event. It doesn't have to be a flood. It doesn't have to be, it could be health problems. It could be a million things. But we went through about 5 days straight of rain where people were mushing around out there. So let me say this. I know the people on Pennington Bend are enthusiastic about this. For the life of me, I'm not sure why they're so excited about getting all of those RVs in there. I just think that tragically, something at some point in some time is going to cause an event that people could lose their lives. You can say, no, it's never going to happen, but we know that's not true. It is going to happen at some point, and somebody's got to put their foot down and make it, make it obvious that this isn't just a game. This isn't just a simple build out. This isn't a simple little, we're going to put a road here and a road there and everybody's going to escape. That's not going to happen. So I just want to leave you with that. Call me what you will. Yeah, I like my view, big deal. I like the wildlife, big deal. But there's people down there, their lives are going to be in jeopardy, and that is going to be the biggest mess you have ever seen, and we're all going to have to look at it, including the people on Pennington Bend. Thank you.
Timothy, Tim Weeks, your hand's up again if you want to ask another question.
Yeah, just a very short question. A lot of people have been raising the issue about traffic. Yeah, during events, there's more people in there, but just on the normal usage for people using the cabins and the RV pads, the councilman in this area, particularly Jeff, if you don't mind commenting on, do you think the one road in and out is sufficient, or is there another long-term plan to address the traffic issue? Because I know that, Jeff, you had to deal with, during the winter time, there was some people that used to do a Christmas light show that was a real traffic problem, and you had to deal with that. So is this more the same, or is there a long-term plan to try to keep this from becoming a bottleneck?
Thanks, Tim. So the lights of dancing lights of Christmas that was on the site next door. The reason why that was such a mess was because the whole model was get in your car and drive slow. And there was no ticketed aspect to it. It was just open from one time to another. And so, yeah, every single piece of pavement, I think, in the Pennington Bend area was filled with cars. So that was a debacle. That finally went away. They were basically a victim of their own success. And I will say that they went out to the Wilson County Fairgrounds and they still had the issue out there. So it was just a matter of them not really managing the success of their event. As far as just one in and one out, there is an emergency crash gate that will be on Pennington Bend Road. It was very important to Pennington Bend neighbors there that there not be an entrance, publicly accessible entrance there. So, but from a emergency services perspective, there will be a crash gate where they can get in there. But I'm comfortable with the as far as the in and out and the traffic study and as far as the capacity of Music Valley Drive to get people to McGavick and then out to Briley.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Laura, if you want to speak, feel free.
I don't have a hand raising icon that I'm aware of. Could I speak momentarily?
Yeah, go for it, Tony, and then hopefully I'll give Laura some time to figure out where her unmute button is.
Okay. So, Councilman Syracuse, I listened to what you just said about the crash gate protection on Pennington Bend. And I'm curious, have you considered the fact that at the very same time, the emergency access onto Pennington Bend is necessary, would be the very time and the very first place that would be flooded in a situation. So although there is this contingency exit, it would be the least valuable exit strategy to assist in removing people. And I'd like to say that my concern about the evacuation situation is that we are dealing with recreational vehicles that are typically used by retired and elderly people most of the time. And these recreational vehicles are like balloons in a flooding situation. They would float very easily and they would block any egress where the water floated them. And I am especially concerned that the evacuation plan addresses situations that if they are badly affected in the Pennington Bend area, that there's also plenty of other areas in Nashville that will be flooded and will need emergency services. And so my question is, are there any proprietary emergency evacuation vehicles, boats, placement of shelters for these people to remove themselves to? I also saw the flood damage in 2010 from my backyard overlooking this area. And while that flood well exceeded the 500-year floodplain, I'm conscious that it is, in fact, a unique event. But insofar as it's really only unique events that we're talking about in terms of danger and perils to the people here, I would express a deep concern that the evacuation potential of this area might exceed the value of the development itself, when in fact there are uses of this property that wouldn't contain such danger to the people who are using it. And I'm deeply, deeply concerned after watching the houses across the river catch fire and boats coming in to get people out, that we are in a town that has proven itself oblivious to traffic needs. We have growth in Nashville that is almost manic, and the traffic needs every day are growing more and more severe. And so the track record of analyzing these needs is apparently not sufficient. And so I would raise everybody's attention to the fact that if you think it's bad in Nashville now with all the growth that's going on, we're talking about very much the same group of people who are going to be approving these situations. And this, from my appraisal as a layman, is the single most dangerous flood zone would be in the city, in the area. And I'll just leave it at that because obviously you know my position on it, but I'd like to find an acceptable use for the Gleaves farm. And I think they are entitled to have a way to develop it. But I would encourage everyone to accept the fact that this, if there is a calamity, that it's very likely that people will perish in this situation.
Tony, thanks. I'll give it to the development team to answer any specific questions about an evacuation plan. I can tell you, and plenty of folks probably here on this call might remember how Pennington Bend had an evacuation plan back in the May 2010 flood. McGavick High School was used. It was pretty effective, actually. And then to your other question, you mentioned about emergency services, I believe. Yeah, the Fire Station 22 is just down the street there, and they do have aquatic rescue services there. So I'm just throwing that in there as just items to note. But I'll give it to the development team to answer any of the specific questions about evacuation plan.
Sure. Thank you, Jeff. This is Katie with Northgate. So one thing to note first, a majority of our guests are families, and these are transient guests, so they'll come and their stay is typically around 4 nights on average. Another thing to note is that while we do have campsites in the floodplain, there is a good deal of land that we have that is above the 500-year floodplain. Or flood line. So, and based even on the 2010 flooding did not occur above that level. And so we would be able to accommodate all of our guests that are in the floodplain. We could immediately pull them out of harm's way and accommodate them above that flood line. And then while we have one entry on Music Valley Drive, we do have 2 additional emergency exits. So we have 3 ways for guests and people living in the multifamily to evacuate, not just one route. And then we do have a full evacuation plan for our campground, and that is flood preparation. So it's not just once there is danger, but it's preparing for a flood before it arrives, and then ways to deal with things once it is there.
Thank you, Katie. I would like to make one comment because you mentioned that the 2010 flood did not exceed the 500-year flood line. That was not my observation that day. My observation was that the water extended all the way over to Briley Parkway. Now, I may be wrong, but I think I saw it with my own eyes. So maybe.
May I add? May I say something? I saw it with my own eyes too. I was down here in the middle of it. I don't know how to raise your hand icon.
This is Tony Gottlieb again. Go ahead, Laura. I'm sorry.
The aerial photos of the flood are on Parcel Viewer. You can see that the flood did not go past where they're showing on the flood line. So you can see that that's on the public records Parcel Viewer website. Maybe they could pull that up and show that the entire tract did not flood, just that area where the red line is.
Well, that would depend on the time in which the photo was taken. But I, with my own eyes, Laura, my eyes.
It didn't flood.
I'm sorry to disagree with you, but at 6 o'clock in the morning on May the 10th, I walked out to the back and saw water that traversed Briley Parkway all the way across. And maybe I'm, it's already 13 years, but that was my observation. That this
wasn't the Opry House also flooded in part? And Opry Mills, I mean, it went into all the whole mall. It was shut down for what, a couple of years? Is that relevant?
I have to interject. My commute was on Briley to the airport area, and I could not commute to work that day because you were in fact right. The water was across Briley.
Frank, maybe you could interject since you own the adjoining properties that they did not flood in the 2010 flood.
I would like to say something, please. Am I on? Can I talk?
Talk.
We have lived on Pennington Bend since 1967. We've seen floods in the 60s, big floods in 78, and we were certainly here during the 2010 flood. We got out just fine. It did not it went to Briley Parkway. The flood went to Briley Parkway and across it by a big dip in the land across from the Opryland complex. It did not get to Briley Parkway. It didn't even get to Music Valley Drive on Pennington Bend. McGavock. So I just want to make that clear.
May I also say that the majority of the people who will be in this project will have access to Music Valley Drive way above where the floodwaters are, and they will go over to McGavock where it's way out of the water, and they can get out straight from McGavock. There's no problem with them. We're the only ones down here on the river that will have a problem, and it won't be any different from the problem we had before. So this project won't make a bit of difference to us.
And we have fought so many developments during all the years that we have lived here. And we know we have had things much, much worse than what is being proposed now, being proposed for the property. And Gleaves certainly knows it, who owns the property. And we know that we would love to keep everything green and undeveloped, but according to law, we can't do it. And we feel like this is the best thing that has been proposed. And we're frankly grateful to have people as nice and cooperative as this company to work with. I'll be quiet now.
Crystal, did you have an additional question? Your hand's up.
Yeah, I just quickly let me say I totally appreciate, because I've been there in East Nashville, properties that I've owned specifically, fighting development, and I can, or agreeing with it but wanting concessions. And Richard and Sherry, I definitely appreciate the fight that you guys have been under. I just want to say this. Okay, and I'm someone who has a property that can be developed on McGavock Pike. Okay, I have almost 300 linear feet on McGavock Pike, and I can tell you I can't develop it because under law, it's zoned RS 30, and so I'm under the exact same restrictions that the Gleaves are under. They go to church with my sister. I don't know them, but I know they're good people. But here's the thing, under law, there's no entitlement for this development. And we all have to appreciate that. Okay. That doesn't mean this development is bad. That doesn't mean that this might not be the best thing to do. But we all need to understand that, just like all of us, me included, the Gleaves included, this property is zoned mostly, like 95%, agriculture only. So there is no entitlement here, right? It's all about an exchange, a transaction. What if we change this zoning? What can we as a neighborhood and a city get in return? Right? That's what it is. So anyway, I just want to make that point. You know, this is about rezoning this property. So there is no under law pressure except for like 5% of this land that is zoned commercial and single family home.
Thank you, Crystal. Paul and Victoria May, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I'm Victoria May. I live at 2409 Pennington Bend Road. And on this new drawing, which is no longer up for us to look at, it appears, thank you, in the top portion where it runs along Pennington Bend Road, there used to be in the earlier drawing many bushes and trees along the road, and it looks like they've been whited out. I wondered if the fence rows that are already there will stay, and if they will add greenery there or not. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for that. This is Katie Hallgren with Northgate.
Hey, Katie.
Yes, the existing trees along there will remain, and then we'll supplement with trees that will follow the greenway along Pennington Bend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Mays, did you have a question?
Yes, I'm Joe Mays. I'm on Bluefield Avenue, and I was just curious if the landscape architects could talk about any flood mitigation strategies. And I joined late, so if you talked about this during the presentation, I can go back and watch. But any flood mitigation strategies that are being implemented either in the development or in the reparations of some of the natural zoning that is staying with the property.
This is Trey Rudolph with Gresham Smith. I'm a landscape architect. I would certainly appreciate any of the engineers on our team who are also present to speak up about this. But as would be the case with any development in the floodplain, we will have to provide compensating cuts. So if there is any fill required for any of this development inside of the floodplain, that would have to be offset on our property to make sure that we don't create any additional flooding condition on adjacent or downstream properties. But Mark or Mickey's from our team would speak more to that.
Yes, this is Mark Spalding with Gresham Smith. I'm a civil engineer with this project, and yeah, within the floodplain area, we're trying to minimize any new impervious area that we show in that area. We're going with gravel drives, gravel padded areas, anything that'll help with infiltration within the floodplain to help minimize the effect of a flood situation. Also, we're meeting all of Metro's requirements for water quality and stormwater. So that's what we've gotten to so far. As the final plan evolves, we'll certainly try to implement anything to minimize the impervious area, the new impervious.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard and Sherry Lawler, did you have another comment or question? Your hand's still up.
I just want to say that we have had a lot of horrible, irresponsible development around the bend, and it has been done because of the councilman that we had, councilman plural. We have been very lucky with our past two councilmen, and you never know what you're going to get. It is a mixed bag when you And I just want to thank Jeff so much because we really appreciate that he has been responsive to what the neighbors want. That's something that you can well, a lot of times you cannot count on, no matter what they say when they run for office. Jeff has done everything he promised us, and I want to thank him. And apparently you have people on Brush Hill have a good council person too.
Yep, go ahead.
That they do. Thank you, Sherry.
Got one
Now we
more,
got
Sharon.
one question here in the room.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Slack. I live at 4007 Brush Hill Road. I saw the 2020 flood. My parents have built this house in 1968. I've also seen other times when it flooded some. But I have a question about the entire property. Is there any kind of and I don't know the appropriate word, I'm sorry, of a geological study of any kind to see if there are Native American remains there, or any kind of anything like that? Because I know right behind my house, there is a cave that goes down the street, I mean, not on the street, but inside the dirt, and there's a cave there, and it's a lengthy cave. And if there's something like that, I certainly would want it preserved. And if there should be human remains, they need to be handled in a very respectful way. And I just want to know if there has been a study or is a study planned. And I think it should be an independent study, not by either group, because I just think studies provided by one group or the other, those who are doing the studying, the people you hire, can have, and I know they're honest people, and I'm not saying they wouldn't be honest, but they just have a tendency to lean toward the side where they're getting their money. And I just think, or maybe it would not be presented completely. So I just would like to hear that that's going to be done. And I know that Nancy said something about one study that was done by the builder. Are there other studies that have been done? And if so, were they independent or were they by the project developers?
This is Katie Hallgren with Northgate. So as we move forward with our final SP process, there will be studies that we're required to do, which will include most likely an archaeological, cultural study, as well as biological studies. And that's something that we would hire out. Those will be required of us for our permitting, and we'll hire out for those to have those studies.
I think she's just not.
Katie, are you there?
Hey, it looks like, are you still trying to speak or are you finished?
Nope, I'm finished.
Right.
I was just seeing if there was a follow-up or any other questions to that.
This is Councilwoman Benedict, and I'll take the high praise earlier. I don't get that much, especially not at home. And it is 8 o'clock at night, so this is the time of night. Anyway, I'm joking about home life. In regards to archaeological studies, in my experience, in my day job, if you come across any burials, there is state law that requires a certain, that requires preservation of that, and there's guidelines that they'll be required to do. They'll also find out through the archaeological study, are there artifacts? And if so, what are those artifacts? Are they arrowheads? Are they more than that? And so, and then there again, there's laws that dictate what they need to do about that. Councilmember Syracuse and I sitting here earlier, we're talking about how these studies are done. And when we talk about independent studies, one of the things that the city used to do before we couldn't afford to do it anymore is we did these studies. And then we, through cutbacks over the years, we ended up having the developers do those studies. One of the things we just talked about, and we can't make it happen today or for this project necessarily, but I think that there's a good opportunity for me to carry some legislation to say, what can we do for the developer to pay for the study and the city to outsource it, to get it more independently done? Because I think, to your point, that is something that is a concern that people have. Now, I do trust that when we've got a development in the neighborhood and it's big like this, that if a traffic study is done, that, you know, sometimes I go back to the folks and say, please do another one. And I think I heard some comments tonight that one was done in April. And so it might be a better idea to do it on the 4th of July and see what traffic looks like, right? So I think that those are all reasonable concessions for us to ask for, to make sure that it is as safe as possible, it is as respectful as possible to the neighbors and to nature. And I, you know, and also, you know, recognizing that something is likely to be done here. How can we preserve the bend as best as possible? And that's what I heard from the Planning Commission when I went back and watched the tape, which I've watched 3 times now in total, just to make sure that the concerns that were brought forward, that then they brought forward, I think that the bulk of them, if not all of them, have been addressed. I don't think that we're getting, you know, I mean, I know that from the District 7 side, we'd love to see it as it is today. I'd love the speeding on Briley Parkway and the loud vehicle noises from Gallatin Pike and Briley Parkway to stop. I know the folks on Pennington Bend and McGavick Pike and all over the whole area. And even as we sit here at the courthouse tonight, we heard the loud mufflers and the noise. And so we all are dealing with those kinds of things, and we don't want to add to the noise. I think the music venue change was a significant concession that was quite likely a big revenue hit for them. That was a very big and important win for us. All of that to say, I really appreciate everybody's engagement on this. We've spent a lot of time on this, rightfully so that we can get it done as right as possible. So thank you for everybody's engagement. Thank you to the Northgate team for your engagement and presentation. And I hope that we continue to have a good, transparent dialogue all the way through this, such as what you've given us tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over. That'll conclude my comments. I think Councilmember Syracuse might want to say something here as we wrap it up and call it a night.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I don't see any other hands, so I guess there's no more questions. I appreciate all the questions. They were excellent. Katie, why don't you just give everybody the timeline where we're headed?
Okay, sure. Thank you. So we have submitted our updated package that is reflected in the illustrative plan that you see here. And then there is the Planning Commission meeting next Thursday, where this updated plan will be presented. And we'll be there. We'll be in attendance.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for attending. You know how to get in touch with Councilwoman Benedict and me. Should you have any questions or comments or whatnot, our phones and whatnot, email boxes are open always. Thank you, Matthew, again in the council office for facilitating this, and everybody have a good rest of your evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.